Yo, you're listening to WTK Radio 90.3 The Rock here in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm DJ Crowley, and we have a very special guest on the phone, Mr. Ben of DubFX, one of my all-time favorites. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Awesome to be here.
All right, so let's get started here. For anybody that doesn't know, tell us a little bit about DubFX and your music, and especially your unique story of your rise to success through literally going out in the street and busking and playing music in front of people. Also, what was that? Was there a moment in your life that said, hey, I want to go out and just play music in the street?
Yeah, so originally I was in loads of different bands in high school and after high school. I was in like reggae band, a funk band, a heavy metal, rap, rock, new metal thing. I was singing with jazz musicians in jazz sort of things. I was emceeing in clubs. This is like, 99, 2000, 2001. So back then, techno, breakbeat, house was really big. And I was sort of like emceeing over that sort of stuff in clubs as well. And and I was also doing acoustic gigs. So I was sort of cutting my teeth in as many different genres and styles as possible as a vocalist. But the one thing that I did have the whole time was an effects pedal, which I put over my vocals. Like a guitar multi-effects pedal, basically. And so what I would do is I'd have delays and reverbs over my voice, and already that was different to most other vocalists that people work with, who vocalists normally rely on the sound engineer, if there is one, to do that for them. Especially the small little gigs, forget about it. So I would bring all that stuff myself. I would also pitch shift my voice so I could sound like different people when I rapped or talked and, did kind of silly stuff with that. I also used octave pedals to make an octave effect to make my voice sound like a bass. So in the jazz band, for example, and the hip hop band, there'd be moments where I'd do bass lines and things like that. And it was all just fun and games, and it was all just interesting and learning how to use my voice like an instrument, but also using the effects over my voice. And so that was kind of what I did for about 4-5 years after high school. And then I finally saw this guy called Mal Webb, who was using a loop station over his voice in Melbourne. And he is a next level vocalist. Is sort of something a bit like Bobby McFerrin, but a bit more crazy and weird. He's like Bobby McFerrin mixed with Aphex Twin, if you can imagine that. So he was using a loop station, and I'd never seen anything like it before. And I just loved how transparent it was to see him build up these incredible soundscapes. And he didn't really make music that you would dance to or anything like that, but it was just amazing to watch, basically. And it was so simple. And so I thought, wow, if I got one of those loop stations, which was an Akai head rush pedal at the time, if I got one of those loop pedals and put that at the end of my vocal effects chain, I could record because I was already beatboxing a little bit. I've never considered myself a great beatboxer, but that was something I would do as well in my shows. So, and also just for fun with friends, And so I thought, well, if I beatboxed into the loop station, then I did those bass lines that I was already making, that I could then rap and sing over the top. I could be doing something completely unique that no one's ever seen before. And so I did exactly that. I grabbed the loop station. I think that was the end of 2005 when I got that finally. And then around that same time, I also knew that nothing was really happening for me in Melbourne, Australia, which has got a great music scene, but I could just feel like there was nothing really happening, and I didn't have any good contacts, and I was in all these different bands, but nothing seemed to be going anywhere. And I was like, you know what? I'm just sick of dealing with all these other bands and all these band members. And I thought, I'm just going to go to Europe. I'm going to travel. I'm going to buy a van. I'm going to travel around and busk on the street and hopefully get inspired to write an amazing body of work, which then I could come back to Australia and record an album and get a record deal and become a superstar. That was kind of like my loose idea of what, because back then that's all you could do. You're at the mercy of record labels, radio, and people who wanted to manage and be your agent, etc. So, social media didn't even exist really yet at that point. MySpace exists, but it was kind of, crap at that point. So anyway, that's what I did. I went overseas and I just started busking around Europe. I started in Italy and in the UK. And very quickly, I noticed how people really loved the looping, as I expected. But rather than, me kind of writing a whole new body of work, I actually already had quite a few songs that I'd already written. And when I translated them into this new setup, as opposed to singing them and playing them on guitar like I did, I was doing it on the loop station. And, you know, people were just like, wow, this guy's writing songs and he's doing it in this completely new way. And people would buy my CD, and it just kind of, word of mouth, it just kind of blew up. I mean, on the street, I would sell up to like 50 to 100 CDs in just a couple of hours. And I did that for a number of years, living in a van, traveling around. And then that was from like, say, 2006 till 2009. And then around 2008, 2009, this guy, Ben Dowden in Bristol, he was like, oh, I need to film you on the street while you're doing one of your busking sessions. So he filmed it, and then he put it on his YouTube channel, and then the video blew up. In fact, it ended up being on the front page of Reddit at that time, which is, he needs a certain number of upvotes to get to that spot, and it did. And so it was kind of like, some people say it was, I've heard a lot of people talk about it back then anyway, at different music conventions and stuff, talking about how that video was one of the first ever viral music videos to really, like, you know, I mean, there were viral cat videos, and not even, I mean, still viral videos didn't really exist proper. That was one of the first ones that kind of got around and blew up, and I kind of was one of the first artists, if not the first artist, to kind of be able to start a career based on YouTube and social media, without the need of record labels, without the need of agents. And I was getting all these gigs offers through my MySpace, and then eventually through my Facebook and email. And, you know, I was kind of doing it all myself at the time, and it just kind of, grew. So that was around 2009 when that all kicked off and started. And then I've kind of refined it. Since then, it's crazy. I mean, it went really well up until about 2012. And then I don't know if you know, but like, you know, all these, the big social media companies like Facebook and stuff started introducing algorithms. And now it's kind of almost impossible to have that to recreate that natural, organic, sort of social media fame and organic reach that once was possible. Isn't kind of impossible now. And that's also, the whole thing's saturated, as you know, and no one shares videos like they used to. But anyway, I rode that first wave, and that was me. I'm still touring, and luckily I built up a fan base and a bunch of contacts within the industry to be able to keep touring, basically. Yeah, absolutely. There was a moment. So I was, when I was a kid, I used to go, like, there's a festival in St Kilda where I grew up in Melbourne, called the St Kilda Festival. And it's kind of not what it used to be, but in the 90s it was amazing, and it would attract all kinds of street performers from all over the world. And I used to just go down, ride my bike down by myself when I was like 12, 11, 13. I'd just go and watch these street performers. I always thought to myself, and I've always been into entertainment, and I always kind of knew that I would be an entertainer. I kind of originally thought I was going to be an actor because my uncles are actors, and dancers and musicians. They're all kind of in the arts. But I kind of thought I was going to get into acting. And then I realized in high school that actors were idiots, and I didn't want anything to do with them, and all the musicians were super cool. And, you know, there were no good frontmen, and I was like, well, I can be a frontman because I want the attention. You know, I was like, that's what I was like back then. So, and I thought I could sing. Who can't sing? Singing's easy. So I just kind of like learned how to sing, and I was kind of one of those people that just was happy to do it. And then when I started street performing, it just came very naturally because I'd already seen it. My parents also, when I was, you know, a baby, my parents used to sell jewelry on the street that my mum would make. So I already kind of came from that gypsy lifestyle where they lived in a van and traveled around, and, you know, so it's kind of in my blood, I guess you could say.
So the logo, it's a really interesting one. Can you tell us just a little bit about the story behind this logo?
So yeah, the logo is an interesting one. That is one of those things that sort of came to me early on. I didn't really understand what I was doing, and it was kind of like one of those beautiful things that later on down the track, when I actually looked into it a bit more, I realized I totally nailed it. And it was, you know, there's so much going on there. I mean, it's, for those who don't know it, it's a kind of a play on the Trinity knot, which actually, I think it was John Bonham's logo in Led Zeppelin. Like, each of the members had a different symbol, and I think his was the Trinity knot. Mine is not the same. It's kind of more rounded, and it looks more circular. And it has, you know, you'd have to look at it to really understand what I'm talking about. But the point is, in some cultures, it's it symbolizes the mother, the maiden, and the crone. In the Christianity, that was in one particular thing. In in Christianity, it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. There are other I can't remember where. There was another one. I think it was in Asia somewhere. It was to do with heaven, earth, and the body. There's it basically saying that there's this Trinity. When I originally came up with it, I just liked the fact that it looked like a loop. I didn't want to use an infinity symbol because I thought that was a bit too obvious. And I was just kind of trying to find symbols that kind of did an infinite loop. And that particular symbol logo does. And also at the time, I was using 3 loops at the time. Everything I did was it had a loop station that could only do 3 loops at the time. Now I've got a loop station that does 5, but I would put drums on one loop, I would put harmonies and chords on the other, and I put bass lines on the third, and then I would sing over the top. It's just one of those things. That was at the beginning, but then since then I've learned so much about it, and I've realized that so much of what I believe in consciously and the way that I express myself, it's a very powerful symbol. And to have that, always with my music, it's a very strengthening symbol, and it adds a lot of power to my messages, I believe.
So one thing I've noticed with especially your live performances, perfection seems to be your game. I'm a perfectionist as well, and it can be very difficult and stressful sometimes to get it exactly right. I've seen videos of you literally stopping the show live and saying, nope, that's not right. Let's try that again. Where does that come from? Obviously, live looping is a game of perfection.
Yeah, I'm definitely a perfectionist. There's no secret there. I think one of the things about what I do, if you're just looking at it from a live performance standpoint, it's very easy. It's very easy to train wreck a song by putting a crap sound into the loop station, because once it's in there, and if you keep going, then it's just going to stay there the whole time. So you have to make sure that every single sound that you make and goes in there is a beautiful sound. It has to be, because when a band's playing, if someone hits a wrong note, that was just one moment. The next time that moment comes, they might get they'll probably get the right note. So a mistake is very easily, buried by just the constant flow of new music and improvisation, or even just by locking in and staying in the pocket. So a band can make a mistake and it's fine. Whereas in a loop station, you have to make sure that you get you get it perfect, so that you get a good sounding loop. If you can get a okay sounding sound, then it's just going to be an okay sounding loop. You have to strive for perfection in order to make sure that you get the most out of it. When you think about it, like just a hip hop beat made in the studio, they'll sit there for hours, the producers, or trap or drum and bass or house or whatever. They'll sit there for hours with the loop running round and round, making sure that every little sound is in its place. Every groove, every little moment, everything is by design. It's 100% worked out, and they'll spend hours on a 4-bar loop. Whereas on stage, you're making that loop there. You've got to get it right first time, and so in order to do that, you have to be really, really careful. And if the first thing you make is crap, then you just got to start again. And having said that, there are times where I'll even run back the loop when I haven't done it wrong. I know I did it right, but I'll do it anyway, just because I want to remind people that what I'm doing isn't simple. I make it look really easy, and I make it look like effortless, and so I have to remind everyone. So at least in every single show, at least once, I'll go, oh, no, that wasn't right, and I'll do it again, even if I did it right. You know what I mean? I learned that from street performing, because I used to watch the jugglers. That's what they'd do. They could juggle 7 clubs, no problem every time, but they'd build up to this moment, and to make you realize how difficult it was, they would drop a club first time round. And so when I saw that, I was like, I'd see them do it every time, and I was like, oh, they're actually on purpose. So I kind of integrated that into my show as well. And I think that it's important to remind the audience, because you need to show people your vulnerabilities when you're on stage. You don't want to show people your limitations ever, but you want to show them your vulnerabilities. You know, it's useless dropping a club every time and never getting it, or getting a bad loop and never getting it right again. You know, but if you can show them how difficult it is by making one mistake or faking a mistake, then afterwards you get it right. Then they'll go, wow, he did it. You know, and that's something a bit more, it kind of brings them in a bit closer. And oftentimes I don't even have to fake the mistake. I'll actually make a mistake, and then that's it. I've done it. You know what I mean? It's all good.
So you have been releasing all kinds of new music through this crazy Corona, whatever it is. And I'm really excited to talk about this with you. You're releasing a new track every 2 weeks as a part of the Branches EP. Can you tell us about this project? And man, how can we find it and get updated on everything DubFX?
So I released Roots at the beginning of the year, my latest album, and I was supposed to be touring all year on that album. And then throughout the year, I was going to be releasing a bunch of other tracks which didn't make it onto the album, not because they weren't as good. In fact, some of the tracks I prefer from Branches, but they just didn't fit together. It wasn't cohesive. And I like the idea of Roots having a rootsy sound. It kind of goes back to my roots. There's lots of jazz, reggae, dub, lo-fi kind of stuff on there, Afro beat, whatever. So yeah, I kept that album rootsy and did that thing. And then Branches, it's a bit more electronic, but there's also other stuff on there that I've never done before, like acoustic. There's like an acoustic ballad or something, or whatever you want to call it. So there's all kinds of different stuff, remixes of the tunes from Roots. So I'm just putting those out. I was always going to release that throughout the year while being on tour, just because I had so much work that I had so much tunes. But yeah, I mean, look, it worked out fine because it meant I had something to release throughout this pandemic. And now I'm at home and I've written a whole nother 9 tracks actually since this whole thing started. So hopefully, yeah, everything pans out. We go back on tour and I get to play more music. And if anyone wants to know how to find my music, it's pretty simple. Just go to dubfx.com. Or you can search for me on Spotify, DubFX, on iTunes, Bandcamp, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. I'm everywhere.
So social media has also been a huge thing for you, but you're very particular about which ones you really want to hit. It's a vital part of an artist's existence nowadays. It is, especially during the pandemic. You've been using Twitch a lot, as well as still pushing YouTube just as hard as ever. What draws you to those two outlets over the others? Obviously, you are, utilizing everything, Facebook, Instagram, but it seems like Twitch is really big for you and YouTube has always been big for you. So what's your thoughts on that?
So I became known as a YouTube artist in the beginning, I guess, so that was kind of like, that's why I've always stuck to that. And I think the main reason for that is, if you listen to my music and you don't know that I'm looping and you don't really know what my beatboxing sounds like, you're just going to think it just sounds like something else, like just a band or some electronic thing or some hip hop thing or whatever. You're not going to really care about the way it was made. And a lot of my performance and the way that I make my music, it's very much reliant on you seeing what I'm doing. It's because you need to be aware that I'm doing it live. I'm making it all on the spot. And that's actually one of the ties back into the perfection thing. I want to try and make it so that if you don't know that I'm doing that, you still think, oh yeah, that's a fat beat. Oh yeah, that's a cool tune. Oh yeah, great. I like that. I don't want to have to rely on the fact that it's live, but the fact that with YouTube, you can see the performance, it basically means that it stands out compared to everything else. If it's on the radio, it's not going to stand out other than the fact that it's just going to be a good enough song. If it is, I've never been on the radio, so maybe there you go. Maybe it doesn't stand out. But when it comes to YouTube, it does stand out because no one's ever seen it. Well, people have seen it now. There's so many other people out there doing it. I'm not the only one looping. But yeah, I think that's why, it's very much important that you watch it. It's a visual, it's 50% visual, 50% auditory. So yeah, that's why I do it a lot on YouTube, and Twitch is just a great place for me to stream. I mean, I stream everywhere, but Twitch is really cool and easy because they don't shut you down for playing other people's music or playing other people's YouTube videos. It's a lot freer, and it's just a good little community of geeks that like to get together and chat, and it's a manageable space. Don't know really what else to say. Plus, there's a great donating platform with Twitch. So it's kind of like street performing for me. And if you want to watch some of my streams, just go to twitch.tv/DubFX11. And I stream every Wednesday and Saturday at midday UTC time. So might have to get your phone out to figure out what that means for you. But yeah.
What is coming in the future for DubFX? How will music change coming out of this? And can we expect you in the States in the future? Man, I hope, because I remember seeing you in Knoxville, Tennessee years and years and years ago. And we'd love to have you back here in the U.S. A lot of people in the States are really talking about you. And I saw you do a little live thing with Reggae Rise Up, I think on 420 a little while back. So we really want to see you back in the States. Are you going to come back?
Man, I'd love to come out to the States and do more shows there. It's just going to make sense. The reason I haven't been back, I did 4 years in a row. I did 2011, 12, 13, and 14. Is that 3 years in a row? Yeah, whatever. I did that. I did those years, 11, 12, 13, 14. And I just lost money every time. And, I know a lot of bands that do that. They come out to the States. They sell out every show and they still come home in debt. And it's just unfortunate. America is a really tough cookie. And a lot of people in America, I think, don't realize how tough it is for artists. But because, America and Americans, you're in a bubble, and a lot of people don't really know what's going on outside of America. In Europe, it's a totally different story. When you play in Europe, promoters, they book you, they promote the gig, that they do what they're supposed to do. They promote the show, they make sure that people come. They fly you out, or they pay for you to get out there. They get you a hotel room. They'll take you out for dinner. You know what I mean? They'll get you some drinks. They do everything. They make you feel like you're there. Like it's a great experience. Like all over Europe, it's rare that you don't get that. Whereas in the US, that's all you get every time. Unless you're A-list celebrity, you kind of bring everything yourself. You have to bring, you fly yourself there. You book your own hotels. You bring your everything yourself. And some people might think, well, yeah, that's like the American mentality. It's like, well, it's very difficult to survive as an artist doing that. It really, really is. And that's why I haven't been back there, because it's just like I can't just spend 3 months of my time losing money and in hope that maybe one day it'll kind of all pan out. I did it for 4 years in a row, and unless you're booked, by a huge agent and you've got a big record label behind you and they're willing to like hemorrhage cash and just funnel, I don't know. Or if I was to spend 100% of my time in the US and just tour extensively all over the country constantly. But I'm not prepared to do that because I've already got it cranking in Europe. So unless something changes, I'd love to come back. And I met so many great people there and I did so many great things, but I'm not willing to come out and lose a whole bunch of cash for a bunch of shows where the promoters didn't promote it right and not many people rock up, and that was my experience, unfortunately. But, again, like I said, I'd happily come back again for sure.
So this is something that's kind of near and dear to me as a tour manager, concert photographer, manager, all that stuff. I've been in the music business for many years. Your guy is Cade, and it's a very unique situation. He's your manager. I believe he's your TM. He does a lot of your videos, and you even write songs with him and perform them on stage, which is super unique, man. How did this all come about? How did you meet Cade?
Yeah, Cade is an absolute superstar. He is, I wouldn't even call him my right-hand man. Like, he is almost as much DubFX as I am. I mean, for as far as the music and the production, lyrics, all that sort of thing, that's all 100% me. But then pretty much everything else is Cade. When I started out, so me and Cade met in high school, both when we were like 15 years old. He played the drums, I played the guitar, and I was like, hey, let's start a band. So we just were doing Offspring and Green Day and Blink-182 tracks back in, 98 or whatever, 97, whenever that was, maybe 95, even I can't remember, it was ages ago. 20 years ago, yeah, or longer. I've known him for 25 years now, I think. And it's crazy. So we were in bands together at the time, and then when I split off and went off and started DubFX, we didn't really speak for about 3 years or so. We loosely spoke, but he was doing his thing, I was doing my thing. I was traveling around, living in a van, busking. And then when it got to the point where I wasn't able to keep up with all the emails and the bookings that were coming in, plus I was also at that time, I just released my first album, Everything's a Ripple, and I was fulfilling all the orders. They would come in on PayPal, and I would print out the labels, and then I'd take them to the post office and send them off. But then I had to go off and tour because I got all these gigs were coming in, and the whole thing overwhelmed me. I couldn't do it all myself anymore, so I just called Cade up. I'm like, "What are you doing? Can you help me out with this stuff? I'll pay you if you just sort of collate all the data that comes in on the emails and post CDs out to when people order them, and if someone looks like they got a cool gig offer, reply to them and CC me in so I can sort of chat and blah blah blah." And so he just he was like, "Yeah, great, I'd love to." So at the time he was working at a real estate agent, I think, or something like that, and he was doing this on the side for me. And then he was like, "Man, you get so many gig offers. You're getting all this stuff." And he's like, "You get loads of jokers, but you also get loads of serious things. So, and you're selling loads of CDs." And he kind of just "Have you got a Facebook page?" I'm like, "What's Facebook?" I didn't even know at that point. This was early on. And he's like, "Yeah, I'll get you one of those up." And he basically, and he's really into social media. He loves that stuff. He's a gamer. He loves anything technical like that. And he's sort of, so he was like, "Oh, look, I'm going to do a management degree." So he basically, a business degree or something. We did a business course in music, business. And he just kind of took the ball and ran with it, like I say. And, he's also got a really great eye for photography, for graphic design, and that sort of stuff. And so it and that helped because I don't have a good eye for that stuff. I suck at that kind of visual stuff. So he kind of designed my first album cover for Everything's Ripple. He would design the next one he designed the one for Across Worlds. He designed my album cover for Theory of Harmony. We did the Thinking Clear one he did as well. So, he did 4 or 5 album covers for me. And, he's also an amazing rapper. He's a great rapper and a great scratch DJ, actually. So, he has the musical finesse right there. But and so he just comes on tour with me. He tour manages, but he doesn't quite tour manage. We've kind of got a bunch of different people doing different things. Our touring situation is very different to a lot of things because we built it all ourselves from the ground up, and we've kind of been figuring it out as we gone along. And so, we've got a pretty sharp, small team of people that kind of do everything. We've got, I've got a lighting guy, I've got a sound guy, and then I've got a guy called Daniele or Pusher, these two guys that they already have their own kind of little agency company, and they used to book me in Italy back in the day, and now they do my driving and my tour managing. But then there's another guy, Chris, in Germany, who was also one of the first guys to book me back in 2009 or 10. And he also does a bit of tour managing. Tour managing happens through about 3 or 4 different people, including Cade. And it all happens on WhatsApp in a WhatsApp thread. And everyone does their little bit. And I just wake up every morning and I'm like, "Oh, this is what I'm doing today. Sweet." And we drive to the next spot. And I just focus. It's great because I just have to focus on making sure that my albums are getting made, that my live performance is on point, and everyone else kind of knows the rest, and everything just kind of falls into place with this small little crew. And Cade's, he's amazing. He really is a huge asset to what I do.
So you have so many killer, super unique, wild collabs that you work with. What draws you to an artist or even a song that makes you say, hey, man, I want to collab with them?
The collabs kind of all happen very organically. I can't really, it's never been something that I've like made happen so like I just like willed it into being because it was something that I really needed to do. It's never been like that. It's interestingly enough, it's always been that I'm like, I'm in the place in it's like, for example, I did one collab with Talib Kweli, and this is how amazing it was. I was at South by Southwest, and someone was like, hey man, I've got this bus. It's like a rooftop bus, and I'd love you to come on this bus, Talib Kweli, and perform on the bus. Talib Kweli is going to be there. He might jump up and have a rap with you. I can't guarantee it, but he might rap with you. I'm like, oh, sick, sounds fun. So I get on this bus, and when I get on the bus, Mike Love, I don't know if you know Mike Love, but he's an amazing loop artist as well. He was on the bus. I'd never heard of him before at that point. And he did a set. It was literally just him performing for me and maybe 2 or 3 other randoms on this bus driving around Austin. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? Who is this guy? And then as soon as he did his set, the bus stopped, he got off, and then Talib and his crew got on, and then I was supposed to set up and perform to Talib Kweli. So each artist before me had performed for the one in front of them, if that makes sense. It was just one of those bizarre situations, and it's crazy how it aligned because, you know, all my videos are either on the street or on rooftops. I've kind of made sure of that. I mean, sometimes I do them in my studio, but mainly it's like I like to be on rooftops or in the street. Give that city background, you know, that cityscape background. And this was perfect because it was on a bus driving around South by Southwest on a rooftop. And then so I did this set. It lasted for about 20 minutes. And then, you know, in the last track, Talib's like, yo, let me jump up. And he jumped up and busted in a next level freestyle. And it was just one of those just things that happened. And I didn't make it happen. It just happened. You know what I mean? So that was one of them. But then all the other ones have been very similar. Like I did one with Charlie Tuna, a couple with Charlie Tuna. We met at a festival, and the festival organizer said, hey, have you ever met Charlie Tuna? I'm like, never. He's like, do you guys want to make a track together for the festival? I'm like, would love to. And he was like, yeah, cool. Yeah, cool, as he said. And so we got together, and, you know, it just happened. It was put together by other people. It was kind of never, you know, something super planned. And then same goes for all the others. This one in India, on a rooftop in India, that was just me. I was there to do some shows in Mumbai, and the guy who booked me never told me this, but he's like, oh, look, there's a guy here, he's an Indian singer. He's going to sing on your sets. I'm like, oh, okay. Is that right? Is it? He's like, yeah. He's like, look, the only way I can actually fund international artists coming out, I get these grants from the government, is through collaboration with other Indian artists. And I was like, okay, cool. That makes total sense. I wish that he'd told me beforehand, but because of my values and the way I feel about collaboration, it didn't bother me in the slightest. Anyway, I was like, but you know, some people might be funny about that stuff, like having to have someone they've never met before being on their show, in their show. But, you know, that's India, by the way. So that's just the way it is. So I'm like, yeah, cool. Absolutely. That sounds great. I'd love to do that. That's actually what I want to do. And he's like, well, he's right here. Should we have a jam? I'm like, okay, cool. Let's have a jam. He's like, why don't we just film the jam? And I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, well, why don't we go up to the rooftop and film the jam? I'm like, okay, that sounds even better. So we literally brought all the gear up to the top. This is the day I've arrived from like a 9-hour flight from London, or 12-hour flight, I can't remember how long. We set up the gear, and I just start, and the first thing we did was literally the song that came out on that video, the No Rest for the Wicked, which was just, it absolutely blows my mind to this day when I watch that video, just of how next level it came out. It was just so cool. And the guy Mahesh Vinayakaram, he's just an incredible vocalist, just blew everything I've ever done out of the water. It was just one of those amazing moments. And that's a lot of the videos I've done have all just been one takes. It's the first take. And you just kind of, I guess that also is one of the great things about being super slick and professional and being a perfectionist, to make because I know that I can nail anything I do first time around. I just, like, even if it's a collab or it's a jam or it's something, I know I trust very much in my ability and the pedals and my equipment, and the fact that I've spent, you know, 100,000 hours doing what I do means I'm very, confident with it. And it's just beautiful when you put together with other incredible talent who can just smash it. And so the collaborations, like I say, have just been super organic and incredibly inspiring.
So everybody in the States, a lot of the times they focus on just the music in the States, but there's so much more going on musically outside of the United States of America. Tell us about the Australian, European, and overall world reggae dub scene. There's so much out there that everybody here in the U.S. hasn't even touched on yet. Are there any artists out there we should really be keeping an eye on?
That's a great question. I mean, it's so unfortunate. I kind of almost feel sorry for American people because of how insulated, you guys are, and by how the media and the government is constantly telling you that you guys are the center of the universe and doesn't matter what happens outside of America. This is where it's all at. The arts, the music, the films, everything. And, if you're not American, you can see it. It's obvious because you see it already in all the media and the stuff that the way, American rappers or brag about how America is the shit and all this stuff. So it's this kind of funny thing. Like, yes, there's there's loads of incredible art and music and things coming out of America, but then the rest of the world has also incredible art coming out of it. If I had to pick a country that I would say my favorite music comes from, I would have to say the UK. And a lot of Americans might be like, what, the UK? Well, what it comes out of there? That's good. There's so much incredible stuff that is so unique to a UK compared to anywhere else. And the reason I love, even the UK and France and Germany have all got really, really, really cool music coming out of them. But what I love about it the most, and this kind of goes back to all the music industry in America as well and how it reacts. And it kind of feels really weird and strange kind of saying this because I don't want to come off like I don't like America or Americans, and that's not the case. Or, that I don't respect it's really not the case. But I've been all over the world. I've toured all over South America, Asia, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, everywhere. There's very little I haven't been to. I've been to Africa. It's like I see it all and I can see what's going on. And, the thing about America is as much as there is really artistic, incredible, forward-thinking people there, there's also a bunch of assholes that just want to jump on the bandwagon and milk it for every penny that it's worth. And so when you end up with something that's artistic and cool and interesting, it always gets exploited. It always gets rinsed, and to the point where it becomes something that you hate because it's just milked for every last penny. And it's a very American mentality. And I don't want to say every American's like that, but very much the business style of America is to, it's just destroy it, make as much money from you can from it, and then just toss it out into the bin. So what you end up with is like art becomes a product, and then once art becomes a product, it doesn't take long before the audience finally gets it. Oh shit, this is just a bunch of plastic crap. There's no love going on in here. And that's kind of, that it kind of always happens in America. Probably not, partly because of the culture, but also because of the size of the country, the amount of consumerism that takes place in one massive nation. So, that kind of has a play on it. Whereas in Europe, it's not like that. Art gets preserved as soon as, especially the audiences, they're very savvy in Europe. Europeans know when they can very much distinguish the difference between art and product, but super quickly. And like quicker than you would even be able to even imagine, and quicker than I can imagine. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And so things like before they even become a fad, they die because people can tell, it's starting to turn into something crap now. Let's not go there. And so that's one thing about the UK that I have a lot of reverence for. And being Australian, I'm Australian. I'm not even UK. I'm not European. I mean, Australians are very much more Americanized than Englishized, if that, for lack of a better term. There, it's we Australians very much follow in the footsteps of America, and so when I got to the UK, I found it very strange as well, because the Australian culture mirrors American culture much more than the European one. But then I kind of came to this realization: wow, there's so much respect for art. There's so much. It just pushes things forward, and people in the UK, they don't care if something's polished or not. They just want to make sure it's something they've never heard before, Whereas in America and Australia, it's not like that. If it's something they've never heard before, they don't know whether they like it or not. They're like, oh, I'm not sure about this. Give me an example. It doesn't sound like anything that I can compare it to. Australians and Americans are like, oh yeah, sweet, that sounds like Nas, or that sounds like trap, or that sounds like this that I already know of and I know is cool, so therefore I'm going to approve it. That's how we're brought up. Whereas in the UK, it's like, that sounds like Nas. I don't want to listen to that because I may as well just listen to Nas. Or that sounds like trap. I don't need to hear more trap. You know what I mean? They come from that perspective, and I still struggle with it because it's foreign to me and my culture. So, yeah, I don't know. I've just went on a massive rant there, but I hope that kind of explains somewhat the ideology and the sort of, how people think about art. And hopefully, it's just, I hope that rubs off somewhat to people who might be listening in Australia or America. It's just one of those crazy things. But as far as artists coming out, I don't really look at artists as much as I look at labels. I look at a lot of different labels. I love Ninja Tune. I love Hospital Records. There's a lot of different labels that I go through. But then I also love a lot of independent artists. Now, more than ever, independent artists are starting to sort of shine because, and I think this whole pandemic is going to be huge for underground artists because, the fact that streams like, Pendulum, I don't know if you know Pendulum, the drum and bass producers, they got shut down for playing one of their own tunes in a stream on Facebook, right? That's crazy. They played their own song and got shut down. But what does that mean? That means that if you find a bunch of, underground artists who aren't signed to a label on SoundCloud, you can play their tunes and you won't get shut down. And who knows how long this is going to go on for. And when everything opens up again, the festivals aren't going to have enough money to pay for big artists. They're going to only be able to pay for smaller artists. So these independents are going to be able to they're going to get all the bookings. So it's going to be it's a really strange time for what's happening in the music industry, in the music world. And so I don't know, really can't remember what your question was. Can't remember if I've answered it, but yeah, that's how I feel. Oh, yeah, you were also asking about the dub scene and all that sort of stuff. And that, in a way, ties back into what I was saying just before about the UK. And that is that, in the 60s and the 70s, when Jamaicans and Caribbean people were kind of leaving Jamaica to go to the UK and America to work, when the Caribbeans got to the UK, there wasn't an already established black community like the African-American community in America. In the UK, they didn't have that. So the Jamaicans who rocked up, they basically kept their Jamaican culture very much intact, their sound system culture, their reggae music culture very much intact, compared to absorbing and assimilating into the African-American population in America at those times. I mean, and, as you know, Kool Herc was Jamaican. A lot of some of the best hip-hop artists from the very, very beginnings, from all over the US. I was just watching that Hip Hop Evolution or Revolution on Netflix, and they pretty much, all the originators were basically Caribbean to somewhat. They all had Caribbean roots, in America. But, the sound of reggae basically got switched into hip-hop, went into disco and hip-hop and all that sort of stuff. Whereas in the UK, it stayed reggae. And then reggae got sort of flipped and turned into so many different things. From reggae, we got jungle and then jungle turned into drum and bass. But it also, you end up with two-step, like where people were taking old dub records, with a one drop that's like a and then they'd speed it up on the record player and it'd go, which is a whole new groove. And then from that, it turned into garage two-step, which is that kind of sound. And then, so then garage became this huge thing. And then from garage, they went from dub to two-step, and then they dubbed the two-step and made it dubstep, which is and then so dubstep was born, and then America took hold of dubstep and turned it into something else and milked it and destroyed it. You know what I'm saying? Like Skrillex and Bass Dector came along and it became something completely different to what originally was meant to be. And the whole point, there was, the American sounding dubstep is there's no dub, there's no two-step. Sounds more like Nine Inch Nails or something like that. You know what I mean? So, whereas in the UK, you can still go to clubs and listen to original sounding dubstep. I think they've got a new name for it now because the name kind of got killed and has a bad connotation now. But, there's so many different amazing things coming out of the UK that are just so forward thinking and fresh that I just, and the MCs, the vocalists, like when you listen to the way MCs in the UK rap over trap music, they're really pronouncing every single, it's not mumble. They don't mumble, go, like they're actually saying shit, you know what I mean? And they're saying shit incredibly well. If you want to know some names, if you just look up Roots, anyone who knows Roots Maneuver, he's amazing, doing some good stuff. There's a guy called Ocean Wisdom who's incredible, doing some next level stuff. If you haven't heard of Sum T, she is incredible. Just next level vocalists, you know what I mean? Anyway, so I'm going to stop my rant now.
Man, we really appreciate you coming in and talking with us halfway across the world, all the way across the world, that is, man. And you've been a major influence in my career and the music that I listen to and the feelings that I have and the consciousness of what music really is. There's some major stuff going on in the world right now. What's your take on this whole thing, the pandemic, all this fighting, protesting, and really, man, I want to know, what does the rest of the world think about the United States of America right now?
Oh, mate, the whole thing is a clusterfuck. Can I say that? I don't know, man. What does everyone think of the United States? I think for the longest time, the United States has been a bit of a joke to the rest of the world. How can it not? When you look at Trump and you look at the political system and you look at, from George Bush times, it was it's so obvious from the rest of the world standpoint. When we look at what goes on in the US, a lot of it, we see the worst version of the US because that's what the media tends to show us, When I was in America, I was expecting to meet a bunch of redneck idiots like when I first went there, but it turned out there's loads of really clever, awesome, conscious-minded people. Of course there is, but you don't see that. The media doesn't give us that. The media just shows us the man bites dog articles so that we can go, I want to read that. You know what I mean? It's all about shock, value, getting an emotional response out of people on Facebook or whatever. So I don't know. I don't want to say that the world doesn't think too kindly on America, but, to some degree, I think that is the way it is, I've been saying for years that the rest of the world should also be able to elect America's president because, America's president affects all of us, not just America. Like America is basically the bully. They get to choose whatever happens to the rest of the world in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to the UN. I don't try to get involved in politics. I don't really give a shit about politics personally. I think the whole thing is rigged. I don't believe that the system isn't corrupt at its core. I think it's been corrupt at its core from when it started. I think the US was already corrupt when it was being founded in the very, very, very beginnings, regardless of what history books tell us. I think the whole thing is one big lie. It's all psyops. Propaganda has existed forever. And it's legal in America. I think Obama passed this thing in 2006. Was it 2006 or 16? I can't remember. 16. Was he even in power in 6? No. 2016. where propaganda is legal to be spread within America, and they passed that purely to fight against terrorism or some shit. I can't remember. I just listened to this podcast the other day. They were talking about this stuff. It's not even a conspiracy theory podcast. It was just one of those factual kind of things, and they were kind of saying how it's a good thing, and I was just like, oh my God, that's so bad. But point is, I don't know. It's just a weird situation. What do I think? Honestly, I think personally that this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. I think that I don't think it's worth destroying the economy and destroying millions and millions and millions of people's lives over a virus that could potentially kill people. I mean, I know people wouldn't think lightly or not like that. It's a nice thing to say that we got to protect our old, blah, blah, blah. But I think that our immune systems are only compromised when we don't look after ourselves. And, I trust myself that if I was to get COVID, that I would be fine. I know that. Same with my mum, who's elderly. She lives a really healthy lifestyle. But if people just smash Maccas and drink soft drinks every day and then they get COVID and die. I mean, there are people who die of heart attacks at 40 years old. There are people that, you know what I mean? Like, the world is so unhealthy as is. If a virus sweeps the planet and kills the weakest people, as horrible and as dark as that is, I don't think that's anywhere near as horrible and dark as destroying able-bodied, healthy citizens who have got independent businesses. I think that I do not believe that for 1 second. And I also, from the reports coming out, everything changes every 5 minutes. Asymptomatic people can't transmit it. They can transmit it now. Oh, no, they can't transmit it only this much. It doesn't stay on surfaces. So, all the reasons that we went into lockdown have turned out to not be good enough, reasons. They're not even been real reasons. And so, personally, I think there is definitely a conspiracy going on. If it wasn't put out by some military operation to put COVID into the world, which is possible, but it's also not possible. Who knows? I don't know. The point is, whether or not that's the case, I still think that people were waiting for something like this to happen, and people like Bill Gates, people like, all these different companies, and I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I don't really care enough about it. I just want everything to go back to normal, and I don't think it would be that impossible for everything to go back to normal. And the longer we wait, the more we stay in lockdown, the harder it is to go back to normal. And we're going to end up with a very, very, very grim future. I think personally we should just fucking get rid of all the masks. Just go out. If you get it, you get it. If you get better, you get better. If you die, you die. I don't know. That's the way I feel about it. It sounds pretty messed up, but I don't think the entire economy. There's so many small businesses that are suffering and getting closed down. We're going to end up with just a few massive globalist corporations owning everything, and that's wrong. I think personally we need to decentralize power as much as possible, and we need to break up these huge billion-dollar companies, trillion-dollar companies. Man, don't get me started. I could talk forever on this stuff, but yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what to say. I think that the whole thing's a joke.
Man, I got one more question for you. I haven't done too many interviews in quite a while. I've been on the road, tour managing, taking pictures, doing social media, like I said earlier, but it's cool to be back interviewing artists, especially you. I always end my interviews with one question, and it's always a different answer. So I'd like to ask you this. What does dub and reggae mean to you, Ben?
Well, thanks very much for having me, man. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. What does dub and reggae mean to me? It's such an interesting question, because I've really spent a long time studying dub and reggae culture. closely and from afar. Been to Jamaica. I've read books on it. But essentially, I think the concept of dub really is when you look at it from a musical perspective and a genre perspective, it's finding the space between the sound. You know what I mean? It's finding this the minimal amount that you need to move somebody. That's what dub is. It's like stripping back the music till you're left with the core essence, the soul. And I feel like that's partly why I named myself DubFX. You could say it's cultural appropriation these days, and it probably is. But, the reason I named it that was because I felt that's what I was doing in the moment. By looping my voice, I was basically looping the core basic elements that I needed to move the crowd. I was also doing other things like, because I would make a beat, I make a bass line, and I'd put some sounds down to sort of make a chord or whatever. And then I would sing over the top, and it would all be about the lyrics, the melody, and the projection, what I projected into the music. And, as far as vocalists are concerned, reggae vocalists are, in my opinion, the best in the world. I think there's nothing tougher. I used to be in a metal band, and I thought that was tough. But then when you listen to Sizzler and Capleton, there's nothing tougher than those guys. They are so much tougher. Like the music, even Barrington Levy or whoever, it's Damian Marley, Bob Marley. It's just so dirty and dubby and filthy and just heavy, and it's just so good. And so, I don't know, what does it mean to me? I think that even though I wouldn't even call myself, personally, I would never call myself a reggae artist, I would definitely say that I incorporate dub and the concept of dub into my music. The ideology is definitely in my music. I don't know what I call my own music. I don't really care about calling my music a specific genre, because it's so many different things rolled into one. But reggae to me, it's just, there's so much. I think it's the future. I think it's like as old as it is, it's actually one of the most futuristic sounding genres out there. When you look at the way the bass lines are walking melodic bass lines, like some tunes, the bass line is the melody. You know what I mean? From dum 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 dum. It's such a strong melody. The way the drums are on the one drop with this skippy hi-hat pattern, there's nothing you can compare that to. That is such a complicated yet simple drum pattern, and there's so many different variations from your 4 to the floor, the steppers, boom boom cat, boom boom cat. Then you got your rockers, there's ska, all that sort of stuff. The drumming in reggae is really advanced stuff. And then the fact that the chords, that the guitars, it's very much more like funk. It's like, it's the guitars are played percussively. The keys are played percussively. It's not, supposed to be big, lush chords, but they'll still drop them in every now and then, but it's more about the rhythm of it, and then all the space echo-y delays, the reverbs. In the 70s, there was nothing like it. And even today, when you listen to it, it still sounds current. It still sounds fresh. You play it on a dance floor. So, I don't know. I think reggae is such an incredible genre, and it's like an all-encompassing. It's sort of like saying jazz, you know what I mean? There's so many different variants in jazz. Same goes with reggae. There's so many different things within reggae and dub. And it just means, to me, it's the foundation and the core of what I love about music.
Man, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for talking with us. And man, we can't wait to see what DubFX brings in the future. Music is coming back. We know it is. At some point, it's coming back. But in the meantime, everybody out there, make sure you're making music. This is the time to write and create, and then go show the world what you got whenever this all comes back. Ben, thank you so much for calling in, and we will see you in the future.
Bless you, man. Thank you so much for having me. Peace out. Peace out.